Welcome to Senate Appropriations Judicial Subcommittee. I want to thank everyone for being here. I appreciate the presentations we're going to receive this afternoon to keep us informed. I want to thank the members of the committee for their service and certainly the folks from the Senate Budget Office for their good work. Chief Justice Boggs, right now I think we're hearing it's the best judicial update we've heard.
Well, that had to have been only because of the time.
Well, it was actually the best since last year. I didn't finish what I said. But no, great job, sir. Great job. Thank you for you and the service of everyone on your court and the other courts. We're going to go ahead and get started. If we don't have any preliminary announcements from my chief or members, okay. Justice Boggs, love to hear from you. Yes, sir, please.
Members of the committee, let me get right to it. I'm working off of Section 10, beginning on page, I'm not sure what page, Section 10 of the budget, beginning with items 29.1 for the Supreme Court, if you have those in front of you. The FY24 budget is not markedly different than what you've seen in the past. You'll see items 29.1 through 29.4 are our typical pass-throughs. Happy to go through those with you, but essentially those involve matters like GBA annual rent, employer share of health insurance premiums, annualizing the changes in the justices' ERS plans and so forth. Those numbers are consistent with our previous request, 29.1 and 29 through 29.4. We've got some additional asks that begin at 29.5. As you know, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, the Supreme Court relies heavily on the lawyers that we have both in chambers and in our section of central staff. Our central staff lawyers are comprised of 7 people. We have 2 extras that work on death penalty cases for us, but essentially all of the lawyers that review every case for screenings, for jurisdictional problems, and otherwise, we have 7 lawyers, and that's really an understaffing in our opinion. By comparison purposes, the Court of Appeals has 15. They have 30% more cases than we do, and they need that. I've served on that court. Justice Peterson has served on that court, and that's an appropriate size staffing for the types of work and levels of work that we get. But at the Supreme Court, as I mentioned this morning in my remarks, while it's true that all of these trial courts are moving cases, those cases are going to end up in our courts, and we cannot wait with the constitutional 2-term limit rule that we have at our courts, at the Intermediate Appellate Court in our court, to get funding for, advertise, interview, and hire and onboard central staff lawyers to help us with what we know is coming. And so what we're asking for at 29.5 are funds for 1 floating staff attorney. That's a staff attorney that will work in central staff unless needed in chambers. As you know, each of the justices on our court has 2 in-chambers staff attorneys as well that assist our judges. This floating staff attorney would assist by being able to go to chambers when one of those lawyers is out for maternity leave or sickness or otherwise, which happens quite regularly. You should also know that of the central staff, of the lawyers we have that are in chambers, we have 19 of those. We've lost 4 just in the last year. So we've had significant turnover. That's a huge percentage when you consider we only have 19 to begin with. And so we're looking for a floating staff attorney. It's a position we asked for in last year's budget. That number is $163,071, and you'll see that number reflected in the budget. The other position is just a full-time central staff lawyer. We need extra help in our central staff, and so we're asking for that position to be funded as well. 29.7 is a request for a 3% salary adjustment for our law clerks. And what we're really asking for there, just to be clear, we put, of course, our budget together before we were aware the governor was going to propose, and the House and Senate would agree possibly to a $2,000 pay raise. So what we're asking for there reflected is the net difference between a 3% request and the $2,000 COLA that has been offered up by the governor. I should tell you that's not for everyone. That is only for our permanent in-chambers and central staff and death penalty clerks. So that's 28 people that would apply to. So you'll see the number of $79,146, and that's the net difference. In addition, you do see on 29.8 the 3% adjustment for our administrative assistants. We are not asking for a net difference for them between 3% and the $2,000, because frankly $2,000 constitutes 3% for most of them, or right at it. So we're very appreciative for what you're all able to do with that COLA. We thank the governor and we thank you all, but we're not asking for any difference there. So if the COLA is approved, that zeroes out. Lastly, you'll remember when we came on the amended fiscal year 23 budget, we were requesting funds for major upgrades to our IT system. That was an $822,000 ask. It appears that's going to be in the amended budget, and as a result, it zeroes out in this budget as we promised we would do. And then lastly, indeed the $2,000 cost of living adjustment for all permanent full-time benefit eligible employees is listed there at $265,583. So those are the asks for the Supreme Court for the FY24 budget. I'm happy to answer questions. We have our fiscal officer and our clerk of court here with us that can assist me if you have questions beyond my ability to answer. Any questions?
Chief Justice, just to make sure I understand, so would the request for 29.5 be for the increase of one floating staff attorney position plus the 29.6 for one central staff attorney position? Would that take you from a total of 7 to a total of 9?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
And is that a product of continuing growing docket size plus the anticipated backlog that you all are going to have
That's
to eventually
absolutely
deal with?
correct. Yes,
Okay.
sir. And the truth is, we as you know, we have, unlike the trial courts, we have a 2-term rule that requires we dispose of these cases, at least most of the things at our court, within 2 terms of court. For us in the Court of Appeals, that is basically 7 months or less. Mm-hmm. And so ultimately, we can't wait till we get to the point of having this problem to try to triage those cases, because by the time we got funding, hopefully you would be in session when we recognized the need, by the time we got funding and we advertised and we hired and we onboarded, those cases would be delayed. So that's the purpose of that. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? None. All right. Chief Justice, thank you for your work. Thank you for your leadership. And again, thank you for the presentation this morning. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Always good to be with you. And thank
Peterson,
you,
thank you for being here as well. All right. Let's hear now from the Court of Appeals, please. Good afternoon, Judge. Good to see you.
Mr. Chairman, good afternoon. Thank you for having us again. Working from Section 5. I will go straight to start.
Judge, can you pull that mic a little
closer? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
There we go. Thank you.
I don't have quite the great voice or hair that the chief does.
None of us do, Judge. None of us have it. We all want it, but none of us have it.
He's a tough act to follow.
Yes.
As mentioned by the chief, Mr. Chairman, in 12.1, we originally submitted a request before we knew that the governor was going to include and that you'd be considering the $2,000 COLA. So that number 504,953, we would like to respectfully ask that we deal with that in this way. If you do consider a 3% salary increase for the lawyers, the staff attorneys, as you do for the Supreme Court, we would respectfully like to ask for that same number for our staff attorneys. The biggest reason we love to keep that parity almost identical, so that between our courts, we draw from a lot of the same people. We don't have a lot of shuffling around. That number, which is not there, would be approximately $159,000. That would be the difference between the $2,000 COLA and an actual 3% raise for the staff attorneys. Exactly as the chief stated, we would not be asking for that for the rest of our staff, because the COLA would be wonderful, and we would very much appreciate it for the rest of our staff. So that's where we are there. We actually do have a little bit of a lower turnover, and so we've kept a lot of our people, and to the chief's point, you see that our numbers are roughly double. That's because we have roughly double the number of staff attorneys almost. So we're in good shape there, and not that he needs me to make his case for him, but certainly they do need those staff attorneys for what that's worth. In 12.2, Mr. Chairman, you will recall, and the committee will recall, we previously had this $83,000 in the amended budget. We were able to zero that out because we came back really well on our cybersecurity audit. We would ask to keep that in this budget. I will tell you, my budget people are going to hit me for saying this, but I'm optimistic that we won't get to that number for our cyber insurance premiums. But to be safe, we are hearing these wild reports of cyber insurance premiums going off the charts. And so that's why it is still there in this budget, if you would consider that.
Judge, if I could ask you, so do you annually go through that process and get a determination of what the premium will be for the upcoming year? And what time of year does that number
They
arrive?
usually operate on the calendar year. John, can you fill in the details?
Yes, unfortunately, our insurance terms in November, so we go through it in October. I've requested with the broker to try to get it on a fiscal year basis, but that seems to be difficult to do. This year, we're going to try to maybe do a year in sum to try to get it on a fiscal year basis, so we wouldn't be in this situation.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. 12.5, Mr. Chairman, can go away completely. That's because the committee has helped us in the amended budget with the money for the technology upgrades, and so that number was originally submitted not knowing if we would get part one fiscal year and part the next, so that can go away. In closing, and take your questions, I will just say the next person you see for budget will likely not be me. It'll be the new chief, Amanda Harper Mercier, who will take over this summer as just the 5th woman to ever lead the Georgia Court of Appeals. So I wanted to say, on behalf of our court, but also on behalf of me, this applies to both the House and this committee. We have been treated unbelievably kindly, both by staff, both by committee members. We are in a position now with the amended budget that we are, both our court and the Supreme Court are very excited about the upgrades we're going to be able to get done for the people of Georgia. That would not be possible without you all. And at every turn, whether it's interacting with staff or you guys, it's been a privilege. So we very much appreciate it. And I think you're going to see dividends in what we're able to deliver. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge, for those remarks. Any questions from the committee? Chairman Huffstetler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What's your mic number, Chairman?
8 here.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was trying to catch up on well, 2 questions, but on the cyber insurance, what is it right now? What's the cost right now? I'm trying to put this in perspective.
$46,000.
Okay.
And they, every time we meet with the broker, they give us a market, what the market's currently doing. And they always tell us it's going up between 150 to 200% a year. And so we're just sort of budgeting for a 100% increase because we did well this past year with only about a 50% increase, but we just don't know if we'll be able to continue to offer the market what it wants.
So it's 49,000, but you're asking for 83,000 additional plus the 49,000. Have I got that right?
Yes.
Okay. So that'd be more than that'd be more than 100% increase. But I know what you're saying. Okay. I just wanted to understand the numbers. The second one was just a question on the retirement system contribution rates. I didn't know what that was last year, and I haven't looked at that. And I know the market's been bad, but it used to be in really good shape. I don't know if that fund's.
I believe what happened to us there, and I'll go to our fiscal officer, Chris Walker, but the calculation for the contribution changed based on the increase in the per diems. We get the same per diem allowance that members of the General Assembly get, and when that went up for you all, it went up for us, and that changed the contribution. Chris, is that accurate?
That's accurate, and there was also an increase in the formula number 2 as well. So it's both.
So what are we going from to in this, just so I'll know?
I'd have to get you a number. We'll be glad to get that for you.
Okay. No more questions.
48 to 54.
Okay. No.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none. Judge, thank you for the presentation, and thanks for your service. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, we'll go to the statewide business court. Good afternoon, Judge. Good to see you.
Good to see you. I'm Bill Hamrick. I'm the judge of the statewide business court, and we appreciate the support you gave us in the supplemental budget FY23. And the only difference in the FY24 is the House added what we believe the number is to implement the governor's 2% cost of living adjustment for our employees. So we would just ask that you hold on to that for us. And we're 5.2 on page 5 of the tracking sheet. We have one program.
Okay. All right. Any questions from the committee? Yep. Chairman Albers.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now that Senator Mullis is no longer serving, are you able to disclose any other information about your time with him at the Capitol?
Can we speak offline about that?
Yes. Thank you.
You could also plead the fifth, Judge, too.
Well, that might be a better idea.
Elected officials are doing that these days, I hear. All right. Anything else? Nothing from the committee. All right. Judge Hamrick, great to be
Thank you.
with you.
Good,
Thank
good
you.
to
Yes,
see you
sir.
all. Thank you.
All right. Let's go to the Judicial Council now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike Boggs here on behalf of the Judicial Council to present their budget. Extend my regrets for Justice Bethel, who's unable to be with us today, but who normally presents this budget for us. We've got some requests in the Judicial Council budget. As you're familiar, the Judicial Council is the policy-making arm of the courts. There are several individual budgets that are housed within the Judicial Council budget. We have several requests, and so I'm on page 2, section 6, beginning with line item 14.1, which falls under the Council of Accountability Court Judges, which is within the Judicial Council budget. So on behalf of the Council of Accountability Court Judges, they are asking for an increase in funds for personnel to add one medication-assisted treatment statewide coordinator position. That is a position that is going to funding at $97,331. That position would ensure the continued funding of the statewide MAT coordinator position. That request is for 3/4 of the funding needed for the position. Currently, grant funding is scheduled to run out on that in September of this year. That position conducts research. They develop and provide technical assistance to our 33 accountability courts throughout the state and help in implementation efforts. So that is a request that comes to you from the Council of Accountability Court Judges. We would ask for your consideration of that request. Moving over to page 3 and the Institute of Continuing Judicial Education, which is likewise housed in the Judicial Council budget. I'm now referring to item 16.1, which is simply a $7,300 ask to true up the cost of living adjustment to account for one employee that was not taken into consideration when this was originally done. Line 16.2 is a request for increased funds to fully administer to fully fund administrative expenses with state funds. That's $148,000, and I think you'll see that on line 16.2. Moving next to page 4 and the Judicial Council. Items 17.1 is to increase funds for one policy council position and policy coordinator position at the AOC. That's $228,924 request. You also see on line 17.2 there are ongoing costs with the automated data collection project that had been funded in the past. Those ongoing costs are in the nature of $20,000. There's also a request on item 17.3 under the Judicial Council. That is a request to establish a grant program to assist with legal self-help centers, law libraries, if you will. We have 2 of those, at least in the state. The law library, one in Judge Brenda Weaver's circuit that has been funded in the past through state legislative efforts and appropriations. This request is for $500,000. That law library in Daugherty County has been in existence for a couple of years now. It started with federal funding. The federal funding expired, but consistent with my remarks this morning, what they do is largely provide self-represented litigants with assistance to get them through the civil litigation in their respective courts. Those courts range from eviction proceedings in magistrate courts to divorce and custody proceedings in our superior courts. That court we actually had, because I knew we would be coming this year requesting for funding for the first time. We had requested and have requested a study be done by the institute at the Georgia State University. They've done a return on investment analysis and demonstrated that those courts provide, that program provides really efficiencies to the courts in our state by moving those cases more diligently through the system. And so we would ask for your favorable consideration of some funding at least to help support that program. The state funding has run out in the past. The federal funding has run out and the grant expired, but in the past and even currently, they're operating on a bit of grant money from the State Bar of Georgia, and they're also operating on some law library fees out of their local jurisdictions that they serve. This jurisdiction in Daugherty County serves an enormous population of self-represented litigants. A problem I experienced when I was a trial court judge, self-represented litigants really slow down the judicial system, and these folks need access to courts. And so what these folks are doing is essentially providing remote proceedings. Many of these litigants don't have they don't have broadband in their communities. They don't have access to computers. And so ultimately they can get that access through this law library.
Justice Boggs, if I could ask before you move on from that one, what was the amount of the federal grant that was non-renewed or somehow the funding was lost?
I'm not sure I can answer that question today, but we can certainly get you an answer to that question. I'm looking in my notes if we have any indication of what the federal grant originally was. I don't know. Do you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
And one other question on those.
And we can get you the report as well from Georgia State
Okay,
if you find that helpful.
Do we have any data, population numbers, traffic numbers of folks that have used the system that was being funded by with the federal funds? And
yeah, indeed, the report that we can provide to you from Georgia
Okay.
State has all the demographic data from the populations that they have served, and it's not just in Daugherty and Albany. In Daugherty County, it's throughout South Georgia. The study reflected that they were serving 40 to 50 counties across the state that were using this law library. Some lawyers are using the law library. And so the resources they provide, that we've been careful to make sure that they don't practice law. They do have a lawyer that is on staff with this law library, but essentially what they're doing is they're directing these people to resources, whether it be Georgia Legal Services or whether it simply be getting them the forms necessary for them to fill out to represent themselves more efficiently in those courts. But we have a study that we can provide to you from Georgia State that demonstrates the value add that law library provides for the citizens that they serve. Again, in a very, very wide rural part of the state in multiple counties. And hundreds and hundreds of litigants have been using this program.
Great, thank you.
Next, on line 17.4, I would draw your attention to a request to fund medical legal partnerships. I talked about that this morning as well. The Committee on Justice for Children is requesting $619,000 to implement a grant program for civil legal services to families of indigent patients. The funding will provide additional grants to organizations for attorneys to support these MLPs, which combine the healthcare expertise of hospital professionals, mainly children's health care, with legal expertise of attorneys to try to improve the outcomes for these children that are in medical care. I would draw your attention to a similar program that you all were gracious enough to fund a couple of years ago, and that I think has proven itself wonderfully, and that is the Kinship Care Program that we're able to fund through a grant program that demonstrated an enormous return on investment to the state for the taxpayer dollars that were allocated to that program. This program, not unlike that, demonstrates a great return to the state and the nature of services provided to these really fragile children. So we would encourage your favorable consideration of this medical legal partnership request, which is on line 17.4. Is that all we have? Yeah. And then lastly, of course, in the Judicial Council budget is the Judicial Qualifications Commission, but as in prior practice, we let the JQC presents their own budget requests there. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions if anyone has any concerning the Judicial Council FY24 budget request.
Any questions from the committee? I don't see any, Justice. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you
Yes, sir,
all
Chief.
for your attention.
Let's hear from the juvenile courts, please.
Good afternoon.
Yes.
I'm Courtney Beal. I'm here for the JQC.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. If you can pull the mic to you.
Sure,
There
sure.
we go. Thank you.
I feel like it's very unfair that I have to follow Justice Boggs, but I understand it is what it is. I am the Deputy Director of the JQC. I've been with the commission for about 3 years now. In the wake of Mr. Boring's departure, I have been delegated the duties and the powers of the director, so I am here to present on the budget today. And our request is very simple. We are asking for an increase of funds to fund an investigative counsel position, and I'm in Section 6, line 18.1. Our request is $49,351. Prior to former Director Boring's departure, he and I discussed how we might be more efficient as we go forward. And since I have been at the commission, Director Boring and myself have had several occasions where we have had to hire out or contract out for counsel to assist us, primarily with our litigation. The result of the bifurcated structure, which I say new because it is new to a lot of people. It's all I've known since I've been at the commission, but the result of that has been we have ended up with somewhat of a hearing or a trial backlog. And I would note that we started last year with 6 of our matters pending hearing or trial. Right now we have 2. Currently, we have 4 full-time staff, and the reality is when we are called upon to litigate one of our cases, when we go to a hearing or a final trial, that includes motions, it includes depositions, it includes the person who, normally the director or the deputy director who is in that role, to go and litigate that matter, leaving the 3 staff members that we currently have in the office. And so our idea was that with some of the funds that we have used to hire contract counsel in the past, we would combine those funds with this requested increase, the $49,000, to create a full-time staff attorney or an investigative counsel position. I'm sorry, not a staff attorney position. I'm glad to answer any questions. And just to be clear, this request comes from the investigative panel, and it would be added to the staff of the investigative panel, which is different than our hearing panel, obviously, where I know that there have been previous conversations about the $100,000 that was granted to them for staff attorney funds.
Any questions? I would just add, not really a question, just a comment. And I remember sort of bearing down on this with Mr. Boring a couple of years ago and did a comparative analysis of the number of staffing positions you have to the number of judges we have.
Yes, sir.
And the JQC was run very lean. And I think you're doing a lot of work with the number of people that you have, and it's very important work. And so this committee thanks you for that.
Thank you.
All right, juvenile courts.
Excuse me. Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. I'm Kirsten Wallace. I'm the Budget Director for the Council of Juvenile Court Judges, and with me I have Eric John, our Executive Director. We'll be working off Section 7. It's page 6 of your document. We actually have one request, and this was pursuant to our Code Section 151152. This was grants to counties, and we were requesting funding for an extra Superior Court judgeship per the formula. Actually, it was brought to our attention that actually we only have 4 judges instead of 5. So we are withdrawing this request. So that was our only request, and we're withdrawing it.
The committee wants some more of that, right? Is that right? Okay.
We don't have anything else.
All right. I take it no questions. I think Judge Hurd usually comes, but no, did you have a question?
It's the last meeting too, I know we had, so I was just, yeah, I do have a question.
Okay, let me recognize Chairman Hufstetler. Oh, okay.
I was number 8, you got me.
Yes, sir, you're on.
I was hearing about the 2-term requirement for our Supreme Court, and I really like that because we've had so many cases delayed on foster children by our juvenile court judges. I know in one county, some children have been waiting since 2019 for a hearing. And quite often, guardian ad litems don't show up. The hearing's delayed another 4 months and that kind of thing. So, you know, I've got a lot of concerns with what we're doing and the fact that cases just seem to be dropped and not continued, you know, for children that are in this system aging out over a couple of years. And I was hoping, you know, the judge would be here today. So it's probably not directed at you necessarily, but it's a big concern.
Yeah. Well, and I apologize, Judge Hurd is in, down in Tifton and has a lot of counties in his circuit and tries to pick out, you know, the days that he can come up here, but, you know, he'd be glad to talk to you about this. But we do, you know, as juvenile courts, we have timelines, and of course there's various continuances, but we have been working very hard the last year, and you may recollect that last year there was some funding in the budget, and Senator Tillery had an initiative with our judges as we worked with DFACS to clear those backlogs, and we've been working very hard to do that, and what that has done is it made our judges look more at their cases and try to determine where is the delay, where is the backlog, and I think we've been doing a good job of that. So we're going to make progress in that based on that initiative, which was tied into a supplement that the judges were receiving.
Right, I know some of them didn't take the supplement, and I think you're right, some of them have been working hard, and I don't think some of them have, so that's
Well,
just
and there was
my comment.
various reasons for the supplement. Some of them are understandable. You'll understand it as legislators because some of the local area circuits have local laws in place that determine what the salary is going to be of each of the judges. So some of them could not take the supplement because it was going to mess that ladder system. But then there are some others that we are tracking down to see why they didn't take. There was some concern by the judges that because we were making a compromise or a memorandum of understanding between the judges and the Department of Family and Children's Services, there may be some conflicts. And in reality, we did have some parents' attorneys make recusal motions on some of our judges in Fulton County because of that. So,
Well, we'll continue to work on that.
Yes.
There's a long way to go.
yes, thank you.
And can I add just to Chairman Huffstetler's comments, you said y'all are still working to determine why some of the judges did not take the $25,000 stipend that was offered. It would probably bode well for all of us if when you get to the end of that and of your inquiry, and to the extent that you can share some of that with this committee, would help. I'll tell you, it raised a lot of questions and raised a lot of eyebrows as to why it wasn't taken. And to the extent that you can provide information on that will answer that, it may be helpful all the way around.
Yeah, we have that, and we will be glad to provide it because we've kept a track of how many are taking it, and we have a lot of them taking it. We have some that specifically are reporting on the caseloads, but told us we cannot, based on the local acts, take the money because it is going to disrupt the way they are in regards to the Superior Court judges, the State Court judges. And then we have those that we need to find out why you didn't take the supplement, what reasons there were. Some were the concerns over the recusals that were being filed against the judges. So
Understood.
we definitely have been tracking that, and we'll have hopefully end of the third quarter, end of the year numbers, so we'll know exactly how we finished up.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you for being with us. Let's hear from our good Department of Law and our Attorney General. Page 22, committee members. Maybe begins on the very bottom of 21, I think.
I only got 16 pages.
There we go, well, you got shorted then, didn't you?
Again, darn it. Budget cuts.
Chairman, my apologies. The entire judiciary left as we came up.
Are
The
they making a
judicial branch
statement?
of state government passed.
Thank you, Attorney General Carr, for being with us. Always great to see you. And
too.
we appreciate your presentation, and thank you for the good job that you're doing
is in the other
with the
budget.
funds that we give you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, and I want to thank the committee. It's wonderful to be with you. This is Kara Convery, who is the head of our statewide gang prosecution unit. I'm going to ask her to step up and comment on one of our requests, but she's doing an unbelievable job in just the 8 months that we have been up and running. And again, thankful to this committee, thankful to the General Assembly and the governor for the support to give us the ability to work with federal, state, and local law enforcement on this issue. Mr. Chairman, we are Section 33 on page 13, but we do have some requests, Mr. Chairman, so I'll go through those quickly. The first is that we're asking for the committee to continue your support to fund our COLA and ERS shortfalls. You helped us in the amended. We are very grateful. Just a continuation of that. So a reminder, $633,445 in the COLA shortfall, $174,253 in the ERS shortfall. The House included it in their FY24 budget. We would just ask this committee and the Senate to support it. Secondly, as we mentioned in the joint hearing that we had, salaries are a major issue for us, and we are requesting a little over $5.7 million to provide $20,000 merit-based salary increases for our attorneys. Again, I would emphasize merit-based. It would be a program, obviously not everybody would get the $20,000, but it would allow us to raise our starting salary, but also reward those and retain those that are doing a good job. I want to give you just some examples of why we just haven't kept pace and we're having a very difficult time. Talking about a lot of what we do, our tort litigation is a lot like insurance defense. We're starting our lawyers at $65,000. If you go downtown here, many firms are starting at $200 plus, but around the state, the number is significantly higher than what we are starting at and where our lawyers are even after 4, 5, or 6 years. A couple other examples. We recently lost a senior human trafficking prosecutor, got a $45,000 pay raise to go work for the DeKalb DA's office. We're experiencing 5-digit pay gaps between AG prosecutors and some county prosecutors. One of our former employees recently went to work for a client agency for a $25,000 pay raise, and we lost another one recently to a different state agency for a $40,000 pay increase. And then we lost somebody recently to the university system for a $50,000 pay increase. So it's not just the private sector, it's agencies and it's the counties, and we understand it, but we really do need to be able to provide some support for our folks. And again, the law department is the only agency that's authorized to represent the state in court. If we can't do it, again, if we don't do it internally, we have to hire SAGs, and I'll mention that in a minute. But our turnover rate went from basically 9% in 2018 to nearly 17% in 2022, and we had 50 employees leave last fiscal year. So again, basically what it comes down to is we can invest in the law department where we can provide our agency's representation for free. There's not going to be less of a need for legal services in the state. We're still going to get sued. If we can't do it, we got to hire SAG, Special Assistant Attorneys General, and those come out of the agency budget. So in essence, it's a litigation tax on the agency if we can't do it internally. So again, we would make that ask. But again, as I mentioned at the joint hearing, we have the funding source for the legislature, and that is in the consumer protection settlements that we end up having every year. On average, since I've been Attorney General, a little over $14 million, and this year we are at little over $21 million that we have sent to the Treasury. And again, that was money that the state wasn't anticipating, hadn't budgeted for, but we're bringing in every year. So we would simply ask that the committee use that as the funding source to appropriate back to us so that we could invest in our department. The House has provided a portion of this request, and we appreciate that very, very much, but we would ask the Senate to consider our $5.7 million ask as it relates to salaries. And then our third ask, again, there's a reason Kara is here doing an unbelievable job, 58 indictments in just 8 months. What we need is a cloud-based evidence management system, and we've requested $1.75 million for that. And I'm going to ask Kara to step up and talk a little bit about that. But basically, so much more evidence is video-based. It's, body cams, it's ring cameras, whatever it may be. And we need to be able to store that and manage it. So I'll ask Kara to step up. Mr. Chairman, if that's okay, for just a very brief explanation.
Absolutely. Welcome to have her. Thank you.
And thank you all. I'll keep it brief. One of the things that we're seeing on a day in and day out basis in this casework, of course, is a huge amount of digital evidence, whether it be video evidence as referenced by the Attorney General, also cell phone extractions. And the bottom line is, as advances in our technology capabilities happen, that size and the need to store it in a really efficient, meaningful way grows as well. So I have in my most recent case, I've got a Apple Watch dump. I have 17 huge cell phone dumps, video surveillance, body cam, all the normal things that come with our case files. But as we're unlocking these phones and developing all these ways to really expand our case files and get into this digital evidence world and remain competitive in that space and use that information in a meaningful way, we've got to, of course, store it. Currently, we've got 15 terabytes of storage in our human trafficking unit and 10 in gangs, and we are approaching capacity in both of those already in the short time that we've had those units. There is a ton of overlap between human trafficking and our gang unit. We just recently indicted a case together, and just that case alone is 5 terabytes of discovery. We have noticed that we spend a huge amount of time with our employees preparing that material to be able to serve to defense counsel. All of that is valuable time that we could be using to make our capacity greater for taking on more cases. Unfortunately, the focus as it grows into these expansive criminal networks, that time is really precious and valuable. We want to really be able to maximize our capacity to take on those complex cases, to store and get out that evidence in a meaningful and safe way, and we need more space to do that. The other thing about the space for our prosecutors is it really allows us to engage that material in a meaningful way. One of the things I mentioned or I meant to mention is the social media returns. We're getting back hundreds of thousands of pages from these social media search warrant returns, which is amazing. There's tons of great evidence in there for us to be able to build stronger cases and really prove these meaningful connections in these criminal enterprises. But we've got to have the ability to store it and have the capacity to engage it. A lot of my prosecutors and investigators are opening those files and the computer will crash because it's just so overwhelming and huge. It's the same issue for our cell phones. In the human trafficking unit, they will have hundreds of hours of video surveillance, for example, outside of a hotel. The higher quality that video surveillance, the more size required to be able to store, serve, and meaningfully engage that evidence. So I thank you so much for your attention to this issue. It's something that comes up on a daily basis, and it's something that I think is important for us to be able to, again, maximize our capacity to do this work and to continue helping agencies all over the state. Thank you.
Kara, let me thank you on behalf of the entire Senate body for the work that y'all have been doing and the focus on gang activity. I know the Attorney General has been a leader in this regard and asking for legislation to be passed, and we have worked with your office on that. I know some of those bills have been greatly supported by our Public Safety Chairman Albers and vetted by Chairman Strickland to the Judiciary Committee, and we appreciate the work that y'all have put into that and the thoughtful approach, and kind of view ourselves as somewhat partners trying to help you do what we know you're trying to do, which we greatly support. And I'm going to recognize Chairman Albers for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem, and ditto to all those comments. Couple quick questions, Kara. First, for e-discovery, are we using relativity, or what tool are we using?
I'll let the expert.
I'm Clark Rayner, I'm the CIO. But yes, we are using relativity. We have a contract through Epic as well, and we're using those services and using relativity for our primary tool for e-discovery.
That's great. And then back to Kara. With the cases that you've been able to indict and move forward, has any of our law enforcement agencies that have been feeding them to you using the Formalytics tool in order to help build that? Can you talk about how important that is to this committee, please?
Absolutely, yes. So the Formalytics tool is something that I was aware of before joining the Attorney General's office, but I have been able to really see the impact of that tool since doing so. And I'm just about to bring on a new team member that is a huge proponent for this tool because he built a 60-defendant RICO in Richmond, Augusta, using it. That tool really allows us to share our networks, again, in a meaningful way. It's all about maximizing that precious time and intel sharing. A lot of the work in the the criminal network world, they're working together, and this allows us to do the same effectively. So this platform, Formulalytics, allows us to share case files with agencies. For a group like our office and our agency, it's huge because I can access your case file from hundreds of miles away and be able to build it with you. It is structured in a way that really helps investigators plug in the essential pieces to make sure we have a high-quality investigation and that I can get the most bang for their buck when it comes to prosecuting these cases fairly and effectively when I come into court. I've got a complete case file. That's something that our entire office has access to, and we intend to really engage as we build out the rest of our team.
Thank you. And Kara, if I could indulge just to ask maybe for your help, even in the form of an email or a memo, there's some confusion, I think, by some folks, both in the legislature, even in budget writing, that this is something to do with GCIC or a gang database. And while we all know that's different, not everybody is connecting those dots. And if you can help, I think, lay out the case, because I believe it's important we get that to every jurisdiction in the state, whether they be prosecuted by you or by someone locally.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we share in that interest for sure. And, quality in, quality out. So we're definitely invested in having high quality information on that platform and it be maximized for information sharing to make sure that we get, again, the highest quality case files.
Thank you so much.
And Chairman, I hear from everybody that uses it the power of that tool as well. Just a couple comments. Kara mentioned that we are adding a team member in Augusta. We also have team members in Albany working regionally. So that's our goal, is intended to be a statewide partner. But the key in the philosophy is partnerships. You have to be able to work with federal, state, and local law enforcement. Pete and the DAs are here. We've got great relationships with them. Again, other state agencies, but also federal agencies, because again, we know that city, county, and state lines don't really matter when you're talking about a lot of these. So again, these partnerships matter. Just to wrap up, $1.75 million for the evidence management system. The House provided half funding for this request. We would ask this committee and the Senate to provide us the full funding so that we can continue to do good work there as well. And then briefly, our fourth ask is $90,787 for salary, benefits, operating costs for one human trafficking analyst position. This in FY24. It's with the support of First Lady Marty Kemp. It would fund one analyst position within the Law Department's Human Trafficking Prosecution Unit that would allow our office to identify and go after illicit massage parlors throughout the state. We appreciate that the House fully funded this request, and we'd ask for your favorable consideration as well. And then finally, we have $16,867 and asked for state funds appropriation for 2 investigator vehicles for our Medicaid fraud unit. At present, the Medicaid fraud unit has needs requiring field work, personnel, and personnel utilize the Law Department rental agreement. And this would, fleet car access would provide us greater control and coordination for day-to-day field activities, allowing us to better investigate and prosecute Medicaid fraud and elder abuse crimes. This increase in $16,867 would allow the Medicaid fraud unit to access $50,601 in additional federal dollars for a total of $67,468. The House fully funded this request, and that we would ask the Senate and this committee for your favorable consideration as well. Mr. Chairman, those are our requests, and we'd be happy to answer any other questions y'all may have.
Thank you, Attorney General. Any questions, further questions? Chairman Hufstetler.
We do appreciate, number 8 here.
Yes, sir.
We do appreciate your work on gang activity, and I was going to tell you that Saturday night, Senator Albers drugged me out with 100 and something people that go out and night in the metro area jointly going after gangs, and I learned a lot about stolen cars and gangs and all that activity, and so from the air and from the ground. So it was a learning experience for me. And the last thing, since you lost an employee that the university system paid $50,000 more, we're going to see if we can't cut their budget so that doesn't happen ever again.
Please don't tell the chancellor that. Please don't tell the chancellor that. Thank you.
Any other questions? None of the, just I guess one, I see you brought your cleanup hitter and corrector, Mr. Banks. Is there anything you need to correct, sir, that is from the guy at the podium?
You and I can chat later, but.
Yes, sir. Thank you. That is good enough. That is good enough. Thank y'all for being here.
Chairman, thanks to the committee.
Yes,
we
sir.
appreciate it.
All right. Let's hear from our Prosecuting Attorneys Council, PAC. Pete, come on up. Sure, it's okay. Yeah, thank you. Good questions.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. For those who don't know me, I'm Pete Skandalakis, Executive Director for the Prosecuting Attorneys Council. I have with me Herb Cranford. Herb is the District Attorney for the Coweta Judicial Circuit, which is a 5-county circuit. And of course, I've got Chris Jones, who is our Chief Financial Officer, who will explain some of the details. Chairman Albers, if I may also put in a plug for Formulalytics. We were when I was the district attorney of the Coweta Judicial Circuit, we were one of the test pilot programs for Formulalytics. It is by far one of the best gang platforms available. Gave us instant information once that data has been put up, helped us build a case, and we successfully prosecuted a number of gang cases. And when I left to become the executive director, Herb Cranford took over. And he can tell you a little bit more about the gang cases they've been able to make. But it is a great program.
If I could, Pete, thank you. So knowing that gang violence is the single greatest threat to violent crime, and in some cases somewhere between 70 and 90% of all violent crimes in the entire state of Georgia, do you think that would make probably one of the biggest meaningful impacts from a tool we could do if we got that statewide?
Mr. Chairman, I have been pushing for Formulalytics to be statewide for the past 7 or 8 years. I think it is a fabulous program. I think it needs to be in every judicial circuit in the state. It is invaluable, and it is relatively inexpensive, and that's the beauty of it. And it gives instant information. If you have a gang member in Augusta who has been validated and that gang member travels down I-20 and commits a crime anywhere down the interstate, gets off on I-85 and goes to Coweta, and we arrest him and put that information in that matches the tattoos or the information we have, you have instant information that Augusta has a case, and you can share that information. It is an invaluable tool. I know you haven't asked me to write a letter, but I'll be glad to unless it hurts.
Going to.
Unless it hurts the chance.
No, I would love one as quick as you're able to write it. Thank you.
I will do that. Thank you, sir. And let me say this, the DA's program is basically 2 programs. So you're going to have the District Attorney's program and then the Prosecuting Attorneys Council's program. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Cranford at this point.
Mr. Chairman, like Pete said, I'm Herb Cranford. I'm the DA in the Coweta Circuit. That's Coweta, Carroll, Troup, Meriwether, and Heard counties. Just for context, out of 50 judicial circuits, in the last study done by the Administrative Office of Courts, we had the 4th highest felony caseload, the 5th highest population, and we're the only circuit with 2 counties over 100,000 people. But my smallest county has 10,000 people. So I've got a unique perspective, I think, in being a large circuit, but also we've got some real rural elements. And I'm here to speak about the DA program. Let's see, section 24.1. I will say real quick, if y'all don't mind, while we're on the topic of Formulalytics, we pulled the numbers from the Department of Corrections at the end of 21, and our circuit from beginning of 2017 to the end of 2021 had sent the most people to prison on a gang conviction out of the 50 circuits. So I think there's a relationship that can be drawn between being a pilot program for Formulalytics and us having the 4th highest felony caseload, but having sent the most people to prison on a gang conviction. So I do think it's valuable, and I think law enforcement in our community would say violent crime went down as gang prosecutions went up. So with that, I'll move on to section 24.1. I believe that's on page 8 out of 16 of the tracking sheet. We've got requested here 1 step increase for the assistant DAs. You know, the issue I'm seeing in my office and my fellow DAs are seeing, we're talking about it, frankly, I and a lot of us are really concerned about the trajectory our offices are headed as we lose experienced people. Recruitment and retention is a serious concern. I'm referring it to a dire situation as I talk to people in my circuit. I think everything the Attorney General said applies to the DA's offices. In fact, I've lost somebody in the last year and a half from my office to the Attorney General's office, if that gives you some context for what we're facing. Our budget, as I think same thing Justice Boggs said, was made before the governor announced the $2,000 COLA increase. On the House side, as I understand it, they gave us the full COLA increase, but in doing so, they reduced our requested step increase. So what we're asking from the Senate is the full step increase as requested from the House, as well as the full COLA $2,000 increase. Again, and we didn't put that COLA in here because we presented this to you all, as I understand it, before the governor made that announcement. We've got 426 ADA positions. 80 of those are already at the top of the scale. So just to kind of put a exclamation point on that COLA ask, those 80 ADAs at the top of the scale would not receive a raise if we only got the step increase. The COLA increase would apply to them. And I will say, you know, those 80 ADAs, assistant DAs, are the people that have made a career of prosecution. They've chosen to do this for a very long time. Those are the people that, the victims in my community, if there's an aggravated child molestation, they want one of those ADAs on the case. And I think they deserve to be, I don't even want to say rewarded, because, you know, they just deserve it, in my opinion. I also want to point out, I think Justice Boggs mentioned this in his speech this morning, we've got around 40 open state-paid ADA positions statewide. If you go back, I believe before the pandemic, Justice Boggs said we had about 11. And if I recall correctly, about a year ago, we had 30 plus. And those are just the state-funded openings. That does not count the county-funded openings that I have in my office that understandably aren't y'all's concern. But I say all that to say there's a lot of open assistant DA positions in the state of Georgia, and it's particularly rough in the rural circuits. A lot of the rural DAs, they get no county funding or very little county funding. So if they can't recruit people into state positions, they're just going without. And I know DAs that have had more than one opening for more than a year, and that's just a serious consequence for their community. Moving on to position 24.2, we're requesting one victim advocate for each of the 50 DA's offices. Victim advocates up to this point have been funded by VOCA funding, Victims of Crime Act funding. This is a federal grant. The legislature put in the formula for funding DA's offices years ago a victim advocate. It's in OCGA 151814.2. That was never funded, though. It's been in the books as a position that each DA's office would have. It's never been funded. This is coming to a head because, as you may be aware, VOCA funding is getting cut. We're not getting as much as we used to. We got a cut this year, but thankfully the governor kind of filled the gap with ARPA funds. I don't know if that's going to happen again. And if we don't get this one victim advocate per DA's office, I think a lot of DA's office, particularly rural DAs, are going to lose their victim advocates. And as I'm sure you all know, it is now not only part of the Georgia Code, but the Georgia Constitution that we provide victim services, and rightly so. I mean, we want to give them notice. We want to have an employee that can take the time to sit with a victim who's going through a very emotional, traumatic situation, sit with them in court when they don't necessarily know what's going on, and kind of explain it as it's happening. This is very impactful to the people in our communities who are suffering, and I think this is just well-spent funds. Moving on down, 24.3, as I understand it, there's a 5% increase to the employer contribution. So we're asking for that funding. 24.4, technology upgrades. What we're talking about there is through the Prosecuting Attorneys Council, we use for internet and also some cloud storage and different things, Microsoft 365. The version we're working off right now is 2016 version, and as I understand it, Microsoft has announced they're no longer going to be updating the 2016 version. They're no longer going to be offering security and protection. So this ask at 24.4 is asking us to get the modern version of Microsoft 365. The current cost is $64 per user for the 16 version. It would go up to $240 per user to have the modern version. Again, I want to point out this, I think it's fair to say, affects the rural DAs the most, because a lot of those offices and the counties that fund those offices, they don't have robust IT systems and employees. So the rural DAs are most dependent on PAC. You know, you talk about a lot of offices and you'll see the email addresses such and such county. You know, the rural offices, my office, it's going through the PAC, you know, Microsoft 365 email system. So getting that up to date so our email systems are protected is very important to us. Finally, on the things I'm talking about with y'all, 24.5, we're asking to annualize the ADA positions that came with the 3 new judgeships from last session, as well as there are 3 new judgeships working their way through the current legislative session in the Coweta Circuit, my circuit, the Atlantic Circuit, and the Dougherty Circuit, that's Albany. As I understand it, the House funded half of what we're requesting. So if we funded these positions as the bill currently funds them on July 1 of 2023, it would cost that $452,000 number. And given that's what the bill calls for, we're asking for that full funding number. And with that, I'll take any questions now, or if you want to finish going through the tracking sheet with Mr. Jones, I'll step aside.
Any questions for the district attorney? Okay,
right.
great.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.
Good presentation.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And just to clarify one quick thing, DA Cranford mentioned on line 24.1, we're asking you to support our original request of $2,050,815. That's to be able to provide the full one-step for those ADAs. And the other item, and this will go both for the DA's program as well as the PAC's program. We do support the House for the statewide spreads. You'll see that I provided those numbers to Sunny as well. So those are calculated correctly. Moving over to the PAC program, line 25.1. This is a similar change to what DA Cranford said related to the employer's retirement system. This is just a true up from, as y'all recall, when we met on the amended budget, for what the 5% change that occurred in May for the employer's share of the ERS system. Ultimately, it was related to the pre-funding of the retirees' COLA. Mike, do you want to talk about the victim charge? Okay.
And now I'm going to kind of wrap it up. One of our biggest asks for in the PAC budget is for a conflict team. As y'all well know, last year, the legislature passed legislation that shifted conflict cases. That is a case in which a DA or a Solicitor General has recused his or her office from prosecution because of a conflict under the rules, professional rules of conduct. And on July 1st, those cases were shifted to the Prosecuting Attorneys Council. And I just want to give you an idea of the numbers that we looked at. On July 1st, we took on 573 cases to try to assign conflict prosecutors. Since July 1st, we've been able to assign out 507. We still have approximately 61 cases to assign as of today. we're averaging about 30 cases per month that are coming in that are conflict cases. But that number can go up or down. But right now, we've got about 61. Of the 507 that we've assigned out to DAs, 278 of them are serious violent felonies. And just to let you know, everyone across the state has assisted us in taking on these conflict cases. So since July 1st of 2002, let me see here. Well, I don't have that. Oh, yes. Since July 1st, PAC has taken on, well, I don't have those numbers. I'm going to get those numbers to you about how many circuits have taken on. But every DA across the state has taken on conflict cases. Solicitors have taken on conflict cases. And this is on top of everything else they've taken on. So what I'm asking for in this budget is I'm asking for an increase so we can have a conflict prosecution team at PAC. This conflict prosecution team you'll find in 25.4, where I'm asking for 3 conflict prosecutors, 1 investigator, and that's in 25.5. In 25.6, a victim advocate, and in 25.7, a conflict case program, so we can manage all this. The reason I'm asking for that is I think we can do a better job of triaging some of these cases and maybe moving some of these cases ourselves instead of trying to find the DAs and the Solicitor Generals to do it. I do anticipate that as we get a hold of these numbers that we can decrease that amount over the years to come. So I don't see this as being a constant in our budget request. I see this as being the ability to manage these cases because of the caseload we have now, because of the caseload we have in the circuits, and being able to provide some assistance. I will tell you, for example, in Columbus, where we have 10 courtrooms going, we have assigned district attorneys from across the state to take on entire courtrooms, and I believe a Solicitor General as well. So what happens is there may be 10 or 15 conflict cases in Judge Smith's courtroom. And so what we ask is for a DA, for 2 DAs to go down to Judge Smith's courtroom and take on about 10 cases apiece of the conflict cases. So that way the judge is coordinating with just 1 DA or 2 DAs to move those cases. It's been working very well in the Chattahoochee Judicial Circuit, and I'm hoping to continue that. We're also asking for, let me pull that up here. Let me just use your notes. In 25.2, we're asking for increases for a victim advocate director. Presently, we use VOCA funds to pay for our director, who sets up all the training across statewide and provides statewide assistance to all the victim assistance directors and advocates across the state. So we're asking for those funds. We're also asking for $188,000, $775,000 for 2 personal services for training specialists. Last year, we performed 186 trainings with just the 5 people that we have there, and our trainings are very cost efficient, much cheaper than the state bar. So we're asking for that. We have about a turnover rate of 22%. There as well. So that's what we need those funds for. Also, one of the things that we're asking for, which is not reflected in the tracking sheet, is an offline request. After we submitted our budget, we received additional information. PAC operates a program called Tracker. It is a program we developed in-house which helps district attorneys and solicitor generals and the Attorney General's office manage cases. It is a outstanding program. It is used now in 50 DA's offices, in 52 Solicitor General's offices. It's used by PAC, by the Attorney General, and by the GBI. It has a total case count of 4,948,000 cases in it. Last year, there were 1,250,000 documents created in 2022 from Tracker. We have not made improvements in Tracker. We have not updated our Tracker system since 2015. We're behind on updating that system, and so therefore we're requesting funds of $228,000 on that. Any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Have I missed anything?
Any questions from the committee? Pete, thanks for being with us. Very thorough as always. And
Thank you,
thanks
Mr. Chairman.
for explaining very well what these funds are for and why they're needed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Thank you all.
Mr. DA, thanks for being with us. All right, let's hear from the Council of Superior Court Judges. What's that?
Council of Superior Court Clerks is available to speak to the budget request.
Okay, we'll get to you next.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Council of Superior Court Judges. Judge Smith, good to see you.
Good to see you. I saw you from above a little earlier today when I was fortunate to be in the House chambers for the joint session to hear from our Chief Justice, Michael Boggs. I think there's probably been enough time elapsed that you won't compare what I say to what he said, but I would have hated to be the person who immediately followed him. I have with me this afternoon Charles Miller, who's our budget officer, who will take,
welcome, Mr. Miller,
who will take the really tough questions. But it's my pleasure to be here. I am Art Smith. I'm the Chief Superior Court Judge in the Chattahoochee Circuit, and I'm here today in my capacity as President of the Council of Superior Court Judges of Georgia. I'm sorry Mr. Skandalakis left. I wanted him to hear me say something nice about him and his oh, okay. All right.
You still get your chance, Judge.
Oh, good. I'll just give the good things then. Our circuit is really indebted to the Prosecuting Attorneys Council through a set of circumstances. Our elected district attorney, who was elected in 2020, was subsequently arrested, indicted, tried, and convicted through a guilty plea and for official acts, which created a vacancy in that office. Governor Kemp searched long and hard and found a really good criminal defense attorney to fill out that term, but he had a large and robust practice with probably 300 or 400 open cases. So that created a real conflict for our local district attorney's office, but Mr. Skandalakis in the back has been very generous with their time in supplying conflict prosecutors for us. Now, we have our presentation begins with section 9 on page 10. We have several requests. Some requests are for increases, some are for reductions. And I'll begin with one of our three budgets that's under the umbrella of our council, and that is the Judicial Administrative District Program budget. And there is a request at line 27.1 for an increase of funds for the addition of a sixth step to the JAD, or the Judicial Assistance Secretary salary step, for a cost of $12,959. Currently, judicial secretaries top out at 17 and a half years. The additional step would begin at year 21 and would help us retain valuable employees, not only in the district offices, but our own personal judicial assistants. And there's roughly a turnover of 19% a year in that job category. We think that this would reduce that turnover. At line 28.100 of the Superior Court Judges Program budget, we're seeking a reduction in funds of $350,678, reflecting a decrease in the rate of contribution for the judicial retirement system from 8.03% to 6.9%. We are, however, asking for increases in funds to annualize the cost of 3 new judgeships which were created in the 2022 legislative session, one for the South Georgia Circuit, one for the Blue Ridge Circuit, and one for the Mountain Circuit, each in the amount of $210,400. At line 28.5, we're seeking an increase of $428,138 for each of 3 new judgeships that have been requested and have in part been approved by this General Assembly. One is for the Daugherty Circuit, effective July 1 of this year. One for the Coweta Circuit, also effective July 1. And finally, one for the Atlantic Circuit, likewise effective on July the 1st. At line 28.8, we're seeking increase to the funds to provide an additional 6 senior judge days per active judge. That comes with a cost of $834,238. In listening to Justice Boggs' address this morning, I thought that he was covering some of the very things that we would be covering this afternoon, the need for senior judges. There are ARPA funds that have been made available to the Superior Court. Only 30 of our 50 circuits have money for senior judge days. But the restriction on the use of those senior judges is this: they can only be used to move serious violent felony cases. The need for senior judges that existed prior to the 2020 legislative session continue to be needed. During the uncertain days of that session, our senior judge funds were reduced by almost $1.9 million, or 94%. In the FY 22 and 23 budgets, additional funding was provided to bring that level to 9, and this request would bring us to the former level of 15 senior judge days per active judge.
Judge, could I ask you a question
Certainly.
before we move on? So, under the current structure of the judges for which money is, senior judges for which money's been appropriated, those can only be used for, you said, for those senior judges to deal with serious felonies. Is that?
Well, there's a little distinction. The ARPA money for senior judges can only be used to clear serious violent felonies.
Okay.
Thank you for that question.
Yes, sir.
Then at line 28.9, much like the request for the secretary in the district offices, we are asking to create a 6-step for our judicial assistant salary plan at a cost of $691,281. This is a recruiting and retention initiative. We're asking at line 28.10 for an increase to the court reporter's contingent expense and travel allowance, which was last adjusted in 1993. Court reporters are hard to find, and this would be a tool to recruit and to retain court reporters and to encourage people to enter the profession of court reporting. With the senior judge money we have, there are occasions when we have a judge and a prosecutor ready to go, but we can't hold court because we don't have a court reporter. There's a shortage in Georgia of court reporters, and we think that this would help address that issue. And then the next 3 items, 28.11, .12, and .13, are requests for reductions, each in the amount of $30,250 for each of those 3 line items, representing a reduction in the cost of equipment for newly established judgeships. A net increase we seek, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee, is in the amount of $3,496,025, and I'll be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Any questions from the committee? Judge, I don't see any. Great job. Thank you for
Thank you, sir.
explaining that and answering my question.
Thank you, sir.
Glad to have you with us today.
It's good to be here.
Council of Superior Court Clerks.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Mike Holloman. I'm here today in my capacity as Executive Director of the Council of Superior Court Clerks. We have two budget requests on page 9, section 8.2.1 and 8.3.1. 8.2.1 is in the approximate amount of $200,000, and that request is related to our efforts over the last 8 months since July 1st of last year to...
Mr. Holloman, excuse me, give me just a moment. For some reason, we're... Well, I need it on this one, though. Do we have it? Okay. I think we've got some different numbers. Where are you number-wise?
8.2.
Okay.
It's under the Prosecuting Attorney's Council section.
Okay. All right. Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Surely. As I said, the funds under 8.2 are related to the fact that the legislature has expressed a concern about the vibrancy of criminal data being reported to the state, specifically the GBI/GCIC, the Georgia Crime Information Center, which is the background system for criminal histories. There's a two-pronged effort that's been underway since the current CDX board was reconstituted. One of those is to promulgate standards that it is hoped would put in place a one-stop shop, if you will, for all of the parties who feed information into this criminal justice pipeline to see what each agency's responsibilities are. The issue, though, is we have, in fact, promulgated those standards in January per the statutory requirement. That was met. Mr. Skandalakis is the chair of the current iteration of that board, and we published those the first week in January. The difficulty with standards is just adopting them and hooking them on a website somewhere doesn't really get it. There are over 3,000 entities reporting to GCIC. We know that because to report to GCIC, you have to have a code, and there are ORI code, and there are right at 3,000 of those. You've heard from many people across all budgets, especially in criminal justice, there's a lot of turnover. So ADA's turnover, parole officers turnover, clerks, deputy clerks, there's turnover, obviously law enforcement. And every time somebody turns over, somebody new takes their spot, and they don't know. So you can't just train 1 year and have a big push, and it gets a lot of attention, and then it goes away. There has to be a sustained, forever effort to continue to reach out to all these people. So basically that 8.2 budget is to put in place a permanent, ongoing education and coordination outreach with all of the entities that are involved in criminal data exchange. The 8.3, that appropriation since 2001, or really started in 2002, was the first time that criminal data was required to be transmitted electronically. That was Senate Bill 50, passed in 2001, and it began in 2002. The clerks were charged with creating a hub to allow all the courts to transmit electronically, because you can imagine in 2002 there was a reduced capacity and there weren't many pipelines, and the clerks happened to have a pipeline that we'd built for real estate that we were able to accommodate this conduit. In 2007, the Georgia Crime Information Center adopted a new software program that added a layer of complexity, which led to the proverbial millions of records not being accepted into the system. Very long reason for that. It's a charge-based system, meaning from the moment of a booking into the jail by the jailer through indictment and accusation and disposition, ultimately, everyone is supposed to amend those charges as they move through the system. That's really hadn't been totally happening. And as a result, it kind of flows down and lands on the clerk's shoulders when the disposition, a valid court-ordered disposition, is rejected because of something that either law enforcement or prosecutors haven't done. And it's been a mess, and it's very difficult to do. So anyway, there are over 200 courts, superior and state, that are still transmitting 30,000 dispositions a month. That's right now, are still using this old hub. It is purely a pass-through in its current capacity. With the appropriation that we received last year, which, as you can see under 8.3, was $345,000, what we've done is enhance what was previously just a dumb pass-through to send these dispositions and then return an error message from GCIC when inevitably there was something missing that they wanted to align. We've taken that and added some analytics and some reports that make better sense of that raw data. First of all, we've taken what's a 5-page report and turned it into a half-a-page report by combining and coordinating the information in that response into a more legible, easily readable format. We've also created the ability for clerks to search for missing or inaccurate criminal data fields, return findings to the reporting agencies as they transmit data, detect which dispositions that have been rejected have not been subsequently retransmitted. There's been no way to do that. We have online right now, with the initial funding that we received, we have taken this raw data and put it into a format that is available for clerks to log in and generate some reports. We'd like to continue that because regardless of where the CDX board ultimately is administratively attached, the need to do this is not going to change. You can relocate it here, there, or anywhere. The fact is these things have to happen. And I would propose we're the only ones that really understand the process from jailer prosecution to the courts. And we've done it. We've been doing it for 17 years, and we'd like to continue to enhance that. Ultimately, that hub will have to be relocated, but that's just a matter of pointing to a new internet address. It can be done very simply. Absent a hub, and ultimately, quite frankly, if we don't do something, that will go away. In its place, it would require these 200 courts that I mentioned that are currently using and have been using this hub as a pass-through to get their data to GCIC. If that goes away, then you have 200 courts that are going to have to independently connect to GCIC through the Georgia Technology Authority has a hub. And there's a thing called an API, which is the Application Program Interface. It'll take some work to get those transmissions to go through both ways because it has to go from the courts to GCIC, but then you have to be able to take the error messages back. So really, we're just saying in lieu of having it go through GTA, which will, believe me, create tons of problems, and there will be a lot more dispositions fail to get through. We think the hub, as it's been working, as we've improved it, is the way to go forward. And have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Holloman. Let's see, any questions? Just a couple, I think. Looking at 8.2.1, increase funds to accommodate ongoing training and IT support for all courts. reporting the data to the Criminal Case Data Exchange Board. What data is going to the board?
There's no data going to the board. The board is a collection of the agencies, specifically law enforcement, prosecutors, and clerks, who are doing the work. The focus of that would be on those members of the CDX board who actually handle the data. Most of the members of the CDX board, whether it be the Department of Corrections or the Judicial Council, don't actually handle the data. When I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks that there's a need to have ongoing training, just because we have one big year, one big push, next year there's a 25% turnover, you've got to have it sustained. Passing those standards was important, and I agree that it was needed. The previous iteration of the CDX board, which started under Governor Deal, in 3 years they were in existence, they never implemented any standards. They were working purely from a technological standpoint. But we believe that there needs to be an effort ongoing. Yes, GCIC does training. They have 2 persons for the state. But the problem, and it's not a problem from their perspective, GCIC trains to what their needs are. We think you need to train at the level that we're all operating, law enforcement, prosecutors, courts, clerks. We have to have a different type of training, a training that's focused on what we're doing, not just what they need.
Okay. And then look at 23.1 on my sheet. This goes to the increased fund request to develop the CDX hub that you've been talking about.
That's
right?
8.3.1. I don't know the other number.
That's okay. It's under my special project. But it's the 1.155 million?
Yes,
Is that
sir.
the number
Yes,
right?
sir.
Okay. And Mr. Holloman, for that, did the Criminal Case Data Exchange Board vote to adopt the CDX Data Hub?
They did not vote to include it in the original standards. There was a thought that we needed to come down here and talk to y'all. We think that it's vital to do it, and we wanted a case. Remember when we
And when you say we, you mean the clerks?
The clerks believe.
Versus the board, right? 'Cause the
I'm
board
speaking for
actually-
the Council of Superior Court Clerks.
Okay, and I want to make sure we keep that distinction clear. What the
Absolutely.
clerks have requested, because it's my understanding that the board actually voted not to adopt the CDX Data Hub.
They voted not to include it in the standards. That's correct, because there was concern that it was not going to be well received down here. I will remind you that we submitted this budget back in August, way before all of this. I mean, we sent it in like the 3rd week in August.
Sure. Okay.
So,
any other questions? Looks like it's just me and you. Mr. Holloman, I think that's it.
All right.
Thanks for your presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. Last but certainly not least, the Georgia Public Defenders Council. Welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to have you with us.
Thank you. And good afternoon, Chairman and members of this body. Good afternoon to you. I am ably supported by Terry Rayford, our CFO, and sitting somewhere there is Natalie Glazier, our Deputy Director for Legal Services and many, many other services. She wears a lot of hats. So those are my supporters here. Thank you so much for allowing us to speak with you again one more time. It's always a privilege to be here. I want to thank you all, the governor, the members of the General Assembly, for your support. As a public defender for a long time, I know where we came from. And so when I say thank you and thank you and thank you, it's because I know where we came from, and I know where we are, and I know where we're going to go with your support. GPDC has more attorneys and officers directly serving clients than any other point since the agency's creation. The compensation has increased from year to year, and we owe all of that to you. we thank you. But we're not without challenges. Even though we have made tremendous progress over the past years when we used to have regular furloughs of employees, hiring freezes, causing delays in the court system and sometimes deferring justice. We're incredibly grateful for the passage of 1391, but we need to be even competitive, even more than in the past. Everyone talks about the great resignation. I think for us it's the great reshuffling. 1 minute, maybe in Coweta we have enough today, and then Coweta we don't have enough tomorrow because we just switch attorneys back and forth. And then in addition to that, we have the legal deserts. We have some areas in this state of Georgia, and I've traveled to all those places where we do not have attorneys. And so I will let you know we don't have the leeway to not provide representation. So we have created something called the specialized unit where we dispatch attorneys on demand. We have collaborations with the Council of Superior Court Judges, Council of Juvenile Court Judges, but we still need help. Just to let you know, we will have someone to represent our clients, but we'll be asking you for some funds this afternoon, but I just want to lay the background for why we're asking for those. We thank the Office of the Governor, OPB, for their support. Our budget is actually contained within the governor's budget, and we support the governor's budget, especially the 2000 cost of living increase. We're really grateful. That will allow us to continue to invest in our employees and ensure that we can meet the emerging needs of the 21st centuries. You have heard from the prosecuting attorneys. We do have parity with them. But I want to make sure that I explain that parity is not just about dollars. Parity is about functions. What is it going to take for us to be able to meet them at their point of need so that we can provide the services that we must provide constitutionally? We are the constitutional and the socially responsive receiving end of all the issues in criminal justice. So when we come to you for parity, we're not saying because they're asking for 10 million, which I think what they're asking for, we're asking you for 8 million. It's still a lot of money, but I want to explain to you why we're asking for that. For an example, we must respond to the conflict representation, which has been a lot in the last year. In 2022, we had 10,976 cases of conflict. Just this year alone, we've received 2,585. We have just started the third month. Since I spoke to you the last time, I have received some reports on how much we're spending on conflicts. Last year, it was $700,000 a month, and we've moved to $1.1 million a month. And that's a result of all the gang cases and the RICO cases and all the multiple defendants. We have one now that we're grappling with in one of our counties that we're thinking is going to cost us extra $500,000 to just pay for the conflict attorneys. We don't have the leeway to take as many cases as we need. Once we take one case, we must conflict out of the rest, even if it's 64 defendants. And that means we're paying another 63 defendants. That means we're compensating lawyers, sometimes at a higher rate, because the trial is going to take a year. And so I just want to explain to you why we are not necessarily asking for $10 million, but we need that money in order to meet the needs of the day, which is the representation that we have to provide. It is tremendous. Just for another example, they have victim witnesses that they put in every county. They need victim witnesses in the courtroom. We don't need social workers in the courtroom, so we have created our own social workers centrally because our social workers do their work before court and after court. Instead of asking for that money, we've asked for the monies for our attorneys because they have to be in court every single day, go visit the client, deal with the client's families and all of that. So just a brief background as to why we're asking for the money. That we know that the gang prosecution is going up. We will be there to make sure that we can represent the clients because it's a constitutional and the statutory right. But at the same time, too, we also make sure that we can provide that socially responsive resources to make sure we can target the needs of the people that we represent so that they can transcend their current circumstances. We are thinking outside of the box. We're inviting folks who are leaving the criminal justice system to go to technical schools so that we can continue to reduce the number of people coming through our system. In another few days now, we'll be signing MOUs with the technical school to make sure that we can put some of our clients who are leaving the criminal justice system, they can go back to school. So just to let you know, we're not just representing our clients, we represent and renew so that we don't just come to you with this huge cost. But today, the huge cost is there. The cases are there. The numbers are phenomenal and the numbers are just great. And we have to be there to represent our clients. So I will go through, we are on the last page and we're asking you for to provide for the 1391, which was a result of the parity, the HB 1391 that you passed for us last year. I don't even know that I can say thank you enough for that. That is 1.156925. We're asking you to raise state attorneys so their compensation can go up to, we're asking for 84. Without that, we will be reshuffled out of business, and that will be for APD 1, 2, 3, and 4 positions. For that, we're asking for $4,599,50691. If we're not able to keep increasing this compensation, and I will continue to say thank you for what you have done in the past, because I will continue to say I know where we came from. We were at a low point, but you have gotten us to a point where we can even start talking about being competitive. But we need to go a little bit further because that's what the market dictates. And so we're asking you to respectfully provide these funds so that we can increase our Assistant Public Defender 1, 2, 3, and 4 to with the starting salary of $84,000. We're also asking for our state investigators because it's not just lawyers that we have. We have investigators who are working very seriously and very hard with our attorneys. We are asking for $260,733 to increase our state investigators so that their salaries can go up with the market as well. Our state administrative assistants should not be left behind. They are the ones in the office making sure that we have everything that we need. We have state administrative 1, 2, 3, and 4 positions. For that, we're asking $311,049. We have state social workers. And those are the ones that I talked to you about. They find socially responsive resources to target the needs of our clients. They make sure that we can find alternative to incarceration. They work with the families to make sure that we can have family re-engagement. And of course, you know, with family re-engagement, we reduce the number of children going through the juvenile court system. And so for those social workers, we're asking respectfully to please give us $217,743 to increase their, I'm sorry, that's a lot. Oh, I messed up right there. We're asking for $33,800 to increase the salaries of our social workers. We have to annualize assistant public defenders positions for new judgeships in Blue Ridge Mountain, South Georgia Judicial Circuits, and that will cost $217,743. In the last year, we have created 12 new offices so that we can handle the conflict cases across the state. And that was in the spirit of making sure that we can have offices that are closer to our clients so that we're not doing everything from Atlanta. We have created those 12 new offices. And we have staffed those offices with state employees. For that, we're asking for rent. We do need a place to put them. Right now, we're just shuffling. And for that, we're asking for $322,953. $322,000. Yes, thank you, Terry. Thank you. $322,953. Thank you, CFO Terry. And the last one is a big item, just like the monies to increase our employees, is the $2 million for the gang and RICO charges. It's a lot. We are having to deal with multiple conflict cases. And when there's delay in prosecution, we have fights at the jail. It creates even more conflicts. And we have to come out of cases that we have been, because now 2 of our clients have been involved in a fight, have been accused of a fight in the jail because they've just been there for too long. These gang and RICO charges are really costing us a lot of money. We're beginning to pay $1.1 million a month. The cost, it is staggering, and we need help with that. We're asking for $2 million to supplement what we have so we can pay our contractors who come to fill the gaps for us, and we're very grateful for that. And in the last year, we have increased the cost for the contractors. When I started this job, I think it was $3,000.
For a murder.
Okay, $3,500 for a murder case. Just last November, we increased it to $7,500. It was $350 for a juvenile case. We have increased it to $1,500. And unless we do that, I mean, you will not get anyone to try a murder case for $3,500. And so we're in need of conflict money. We do everything in-house. If there was a way that I could not ask you, I will just do it in-house, because we have learned to rob Peter to pay Paul. Somebody is getting paid, but we don't have any money to pay anyone anymore. And so I come to you for the $8.9 million. Of course, it's a sticker shock when you hear $8.9 million. That's a lot of money. But the question is, what happens when we don't have access to those resources to do what we need to do? We have the delays in jail. We have family disengagement, which after being in juvenile court for 13 years, I know exactly what that means. There'll be children there because their parents are away. And so we respectfully ask you for this amount, not just because we can ask, but because we need to. I thank you for always allowing me to come before you.
Thank you for that presentation, very thorough. Any questions? Senator, any questions? No questions? Just one follow-up. Number 8, one of the last items you talked about, the
Yes, sir.
$2 million request
Yes, sir.
to provide funds for attorneys tasked with representing clients in large multi-defendant cases.
Yes, sir.
What would those funds be used for? Maybe I missed that.
Okay, thank you for asking that question. So those would be
Pull the microphone
Oh,
closer
sorry.
again.
To pay for the conflict representation. Let me give you an example. We have an indictment of 28 defendants. We can only take one. I heard Mr. Skandalakis say, we can put 4 in some county. We don't have that because of the rules. Once we take one case, the remaining 27 must be farmed out to our contractors. And so we'll have to pay 27 extra people to be on that case.
Okay, so it's for outside counsel,
Yes, sir.
if you will.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right, very good. Okay. No other questions. Thank you very much for being with us, and as always, very thorough. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else to come before the committee? Have we missed anyone? All right. Thank you, Pete. Appreciate you saying that. He has done a good job for us. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, and everybody over in Senate Budget. But Sonny has been at the tip of the spear for us on this work, and thank you very much for that comment. And with that, I think we've gotten through our agenda, and so we will stand adjourned. Thanks for everybody for being here. Bye-bye.